Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Winter Games, brought to us by Epyx. Winter Games was originally released for the Commodore 64 and was later ported over to pretty much every home console that was available at the time. While there were 8 games available in the original Commodore 64 version, the NES version that we're playing today only features 4 games. While I have not played every version of this game, I have to say the NES version has to be one of the absolute worst. Not only are the controls extremely difficult, the games are very confusing, it also has one of the worst soundtracks on the NES. One of the positives though is it is one of the only Olympic style games available for the NES, and actually is the only Winter Olympic themed game available for the system. So here we go with Winter Games for the NES. You have a pretty bland title screen as you see that this version was made in 1987 by Acclaim. We then get our opening ceremony, which this is the best part of the entire game. After the opening ceremony and the torch lighting, you then get to your main menu where you compete in all events, competing in one event, practice the events, see the current world records, or you can watch the opening ceremony again, and trust me, you much rather do that. You then get to pick 1 or 2 players, and we'll be playing 1-player mode here, and then you get to put in your name. I'll be putting in, of course, my name, and then hitting end. You also get to pick what country you want to be from, and once you hit end, after putting in your name, the national anthem of whatever country you pick will play. Again, I have to give the game credit, this is definitely one of the better parts of this game. We then move into our actual first event, Hot Dog Aerials, also known as Freestyle Skiing. Here, your skier jumps into the air, and you get the chance to perform tricks for a short period of time and then have to stick your landing in order to get points. Now, I will do the same trick each time, and as you can see on the second time, I'm able to get a 10. I've only gotten a 10 a couple of times ever. My trick is doing backwards flip, then front flip, then make sure that you land, and if you're lucky, you'll get a high score. Thankfully, you only have to get a high score once, your best score is the only one that ends up counting. There are a few other tricks you can do in the game, but overall don't give you as many points or as many chances for the 10 as the 2 tricks I do. We then move on to speed skating. This is the worst song in the entire game by far. And then when you actually start, the controls are very confusing. You move left and right, back and forth in order to actually move. However, you would think normally you would button mash, mashing left and right as quick as possible, but that's not the way you do it. You quickly mash left and right to start, but once you've gotten speed, you then slow down and get into a rhythm. I cannot exactly explain how the rhythm works. This is something you have to try over and over and over again until you finally get a good enough rhythm. If you have a good rhythm, you'll be able to see your meter in the bottom right corner shoot up from time to time, showing that you're at your maximum speed. If you're able to get this a handful of times throughout the race, you may just be able to catch up to the computer pacer and actually win the race. Though your goal really isn't to beat the computer, it's just to get as low of a score as possible. Sometimes the computer itself will just shoot off with an amazing time that is not even possible in the game. I've seen the computer get as low as a 33. After that ridiculously frustrating event, and trust me, it took me forever to be able to do what I just did in that previous event, we then move on to figure skating. Now this is another one where I do not get the scoring at all how it works. Basically you have to perform tricks, of course. Every time you land a trick, you get a max amount of points. If you mess up a trick or try to do a trick that doesn't exist, you end up falling, and thus lose a large amount of your score. Your goal is to perform every trick one time. If you perform a trick more than once, it doesn't count towards your score. You basically have 2 jumps from the front, 2 jumps from the back, and then 2 spins. You can combine the 2 spins for a different trick. After each jump, you want to hold A to make sure that you land, and you want to make sure that you press A during the spins to get out of it. Okay, so for the tricks themselves, we're going to start off with the triple axel, which is right and down, and then A at the same time. You'll be facing backwards at that point, so do either the triple Lutz or the double Lutz at that point, which is then left and up, or left and down, and A. All the tricks involve A. The spins are up A and down A. To do the double spin, you want to hit up A first, and then after you start spinning a little bit, do down A to go into the ground one. Make sure that you perform every trick at least one time, and make sure that you're facing front when the routine is over, or else you'll also lose points. And you can see after performing every trick and landing them, I only end up getting a 4.6. Now of course this is out of 6, but still, trust me, the figure skating is the most ridiculous thing to try to figure out. I spent hours just trying to do all the tricks, trying to mix them up, to try to get the best score possible, and about a 4.8 or 5 is the absolute best I was ever able to do. Next is up for the Bobsled. Now the Bobsled is the easiest and probably funnest event in the game. It's not saying much. Basically all you gotta do is hold left and right. Now you can hold down to slow down, but you don't want to do that at all. Basically on the turns, when it turns right, you want to hold right to make sure that you hit the edge of the side, but you don't go too far over so you flip, and of course repeat that on the left side by holding left when it turns left. Very easy to get the hang of this. You'll see your speed meter go up, and this one you also get a chance to do it 3 times, so in case you mess up on your first try, you can do it a couple of more times. The only score that counts, though, is the first time that you end up getting, just like with the hot dog aerials. Now, since I already got the best score I'm probably going to get, which is usually between a 51 and a 53, I'm just going to crash at the beginning of the next 2 races and finish things up. After that, the game's over. There's no medal ceremony, there's no congratulations. You can then check out the world records, which are all now the ones I just set, and then you can go back in and compete all things over again. Or watch the opening ceremonies, and then turn off the game, and never play the game again. Winter Games is actually pretty fun, I think, on the other consoles that it was released for, but the NES version is just downright poor. While it is cool that the game features multiple different Winter Game events, unfortunately it's only half of what the other versions of the same game featured, and also the controls for each one, it just will drive you nuts, whether it's trying to land a trick in the skiing, whether it's trying to figure out the pacing in the speed skating, trying to figure out how to just land tricks and do the different tricks in the figure skating, and then finally the Bobsled, which thankfully, after everything you've suffered through, at least has pretty simple controls. But with that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.